Please welcome Alberto López.
How are you?
I figured I'll skip the big introduction because you'll figure out what he's all about while we have this conversation. A lot of what we talk about around here is that you have to do more than one thing. And Alberto here's a fabulous example of that. So let's start with what did you do first? How did you get into the music business?
I got into music as a kid. I was a pianist. I was very focused and serious child. And I decided I want to be a concert pianist, a classical concert pianist. And then somewhere around my late teens, right before I was supposed to go to college, I was enrolled in the New England Conservatory preparatory division as a pianist. I decided I didn't want to be a pianist anymore. I hated, at the time, the classical music world. So I wanted to play new music. I wanted to be involved in some kind of a community thing, not just sitting on a stage playing a piano. And so I had always played percussion on the side. I decided that that was my ticket towards musical freedom. So I auditioned for the Juilliard School, and I got in. And then I also, as I was exploring music, community, making music in community, I also was taking conducting lessons from Mr. Jacques Limono and outside of Juilliard. And eventually I left New York, and I was involved in bands, and we got signed to a band in Rock en Español, as rock in Spanish band. We got signed to BMG Records. And then through that I got into production. And
right, so we're going to hit a little bit of all of that. We're going to talk about the playing and the transition. You were doing some pretty heavy classical stuff, New England Conservatory, the Juilliard School. Yeah. What's the thing that clicks that makes you realize, I'm supposed to be doing something else?
It was, I don't know if it was any one thing, but I noticed that, I can narrow it down to one experience, is when off the cuff, I was asked to play piano with an orchestra, not as a soloist, but as part of the ensemble, which is rare. There's not that many pieces in the classical repertoire that have a piano part. And I remember it was Shostakovich Fifth Symphony. And I looked at the piano part, it's like, it's not very complex. What's the fun in this? Okay, I already gave my word, I'll do it. And I played the piece, and I loved it. I love being part of an ensemble. I love being just in something greater, being involved in something greater than myself. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing, up on stage playing classical solo piano music, it was lonely. It's like, is this what music's about? Maybe it says something about myself. Maybe I'm a kind of loner or non-loner. Right. But that's really what, after that I became really curious. That's when I looked over to the percussion section. I was like, I think I could do that. And that's how I got into it. Yeah.
Let's play something. What do you want to play?
Tell me. Where do we start?
Let's play something early on.
What do we have?
Let's play something that you play on.
Something that I play on. Let me see what we have on the list here. Or is it up there? Let's say a recent thing. What you had it queued up. Oh, they go, Burning Fire. Okay. I see. That's one of the things I can see. This is a release by a friend.
So you can see it now. I can't see it.
Okay. I think it's third from the top. Something like that.
Oh, the one with no artist. That's why I can't see it.
Cut me, make me bleed into the depths of your soul eternally. Taste my blood with you, it runs into the eyes of falling sun. Take away my flesh and bone, draw me out of wood and stone, so I ain't gotta feel all the pain that just won't leave me alone. Take away my flesh and bone, draw me out of wood and stone, so I ain't gotta feel all the pain that just won't leave me alone. Yeah, can't you see, giving every part of my
Cool.
Okay, so tell us about this. Who is this?
That is an artist. His real name is Quetzal Guerrero. He just made the decision to change his name to QVLN. This is a new release of his. It just came out about 2 weeks ago as a single on iTunes. He's born in Arizona, in Phoenix, of a Brazilian mother and a Mexican-American and Native American father. So he was raised, immersed in both cultures. He's an amazing artist, singer, violinist, guitarist, capoeirista. He's also a professor of capoeira. It's amazing because in his music, he brings in together elements of he's American, but it's also, his music is a reflection of his American experience. I mean, what is it to be American? It's not any one specific thing. Everybody has their own way of being American. And his way is, he's singing in English, at least in this part of the song. And he's playing violin, he's using kind of folk Americana, but also Brazilian elements and so on.
You hear a good bit of that. So you're the producer on this track?
I was a co-producer. Actually, in this album, I produced his tracks on his second and third albums. In this one, I was a co-producer and I played the percussion on it.
Okay.
But I was involved in the composition part.
So tell me the story that you told about telling him, this is what you should do.
Well, I've been working with Quetzal for about 9 years now. And we did, like I said, we did a couple albums together. And he's just a really versatile, talented artist. And he's able to play, like I said, guitar, violin. He sings well. He writes great melodies. He's got a great spirit. And all the tracks that we did for all the albums just were all over the place, just like his life is, I mean, culturally speaking. He's a very focused, very disciplined person. But it just seemed like everybody liked everything, but people could relate to one thing or another. But one day I was talking to him, we were having a conversation. I said, well, this is all great, but how about doing something that reflects your American side of things, your US side of things? Everything else was from the outside looking in. It's like, why don't you do something from the inside looking out? And so and this is something that he had been thinking about too. It's not that I said it, no, he had a big epiphany, no. It's something that resonated in him. And what he did was, he stripped down, he decided to run with limitations. Not to say I have a studio and a bunch of instruments that I play at my disposal, no. He went home for months. He just sat with his violin, only his violin, not his guitar, not his drums, not anything else. And he wrote about an album's worth of songs only on his violin. And this is the result. This is the single off of that. And he embraced that. He embraced being American. It's like, this is his first album that's almost completely in English, embracing themes and songwriting styles that American audiences can, not just pop, but folk American and so on, people can relate to.
Right, but the idea behind that is not so much that he's trying to find the stuff the American audience will like, as much as he's finding himself, the real version of him. He's
presenting himself to the United States and the rest of the world.
Right, so if any of you have ever heard me go on my rant about make honest art, be you. That's what he's talking about. Find that thing that makes you you.
Sorry. I should cover this.
It was perfectly placed.
Yeah.
So you mentioned on this that you played some percussion and also had a production role. How did the story happen that you get from being a player to getting onto the technical side of doing some production work, of doing additional things besides just playing?
Besides just playing?
Yeah.
One of the earliest experiences that I think where I finally crossed a bridge. Before, as a player, I had played in sessions and I had played in bands that we went to the studio to record, but as those, I used to just do what a musician does. You play, and you don't really think about much else, which is fine. But then when I was in this Rock en Español band, we were kind of in a quandary. We were signed to this record deal, but we didn't really have much of a budget. to go out and demo too many things, because back in the, I mean, we're talking mid-90s, this is pre-internet, the easy access to digital technology. To record a demo, you had to pay a studio, pay time.
Right,
to
back when the cheap Pro Tools rig was $30,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
Everything was to tape. There was, the overdubbing was just for punching in. There was no multiple takes of a track and so on. So we were short on budget, and it was just like we couldn't hire an arranger to do this. We couldn't hire a studio to do that. So we bought a Porta Studio, which is, 4-channel analog cassette recording machine, and we started doing our own demos, to show them to our producer. And I was like, after 6 months of that, we're like, wait, we're producing this album. Our producer just says yay or nay. It's like, great. So that's how and then it was a bug. I guess once it bites you, it's forever, I think, unfortunately, or fortunately.
Once you find that thing that like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah,
cool.
And then it's like, then hours and weeks and years of reading magazines, then I started going to studios, not only as a musician, but I would talk to the engineer. Like I say, if I got hired as a musician for a session, I would talk to the engineer, say, hey, can I come back tomorrow or another day and just sit in the room and see what you do? And they're usually cool.
Especially early in my career, but even now still, I tend to annoy engineers when I'm there as a player, because I'm always like, well, why did you pick that mic?
Yeah.
Why'd you put that there?
Yeah.
What plug-in is that?
Yeah.
And after a while, they're like, dude, go away.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot like that.
You learn a tremendous amount.
So we made a slide here of some influential people on the technical side of your life. Would you like to talk about them for a second?
Yeah, and this is in no particular order. I was just writing them down. But I can, 3 of the most influential people, as far as the technical side of music production, are these 3 people. Let's say
So, hint, write these names down, go Google them after forum.
Yeah. So Robert Carranza is actually a friend. Somebody, I mean, I don't, not deep friendship, but it's somebody that known as a player. He has been the engineer. He was the main engineer for Mario Caldato Jr., who you may know as the producer of like the Beastie Boys and a bunch of awesome music from the mid-90s, and still, he does great music. And Robert started there, and then he just became like a world superstar. Recording and mixing engineer. He does Jack Johnson, Paul McCartney, whatever. His list is long and distinguished, no doubt. You name it, he's probably worked with them. And when I was starting my production company and I was getting ready to do my first release, I was not an engineer. I didn't pretend to be an engineer. But I looked up to Robert and I said, Robert, could you help me out with this? He's like, man, I really want to help you out, but I said, I'm booked solid. It's like, can you wait 6 months? And I could give you like a week of night sessions, And I was like, me being a little impetuous and impatient, I was like, I can't wait 6 months. I'll die in 6 months if I don't finish this, So that's when I started. I said, well, I'm just going to mix this myself. I'm going to finish recording it and mix it myself. So he threw the example of his greatness, I mean, me admiring what he does as an engineer. I took him as an example. I want to sound that good or on that level, even though I don't know nothing except for what I've just seen in sessions. So I went to the guy at the bottom of the list called Eric Ferguson, because I used to be the percussionist. I did like a season of shows with a jazz guitar player named Lee Rittenauer. And I had been working with Lee, and I had been recording for some of his productions, and Eric was his engineer. And so Eric was the guy who I really bombarded with questions and really said, hey, help me. And especially when I was mixing this particular album. And he, after, I don't know, about a month or 2, he's like, dude, just do it. Enough questions, just do it. So you need to not hire me as your mixer. You need to start mixing. You need to, because only you are going to, once you get your skills, only you are going to be the one that's going to hear the sound in your head and translate it into a reality. And then So I said, you know, that was a nice kick in the pants. And I struggled for about 3-4 months to finish working on this album, which ended up being the 6 months that Robert had told me to wait. And I finished it, and I was handing it over. It was for a Brazilian artist that I was working with, and I was also acting as a label. And I handed it over to our distribution company, and they were ready to put it out. But I just listened to it, and I was like, oh God, it just doesn't sound as good as these guys. It sounds okay, but what's the next step? So I asked the distribution company, and the head of the distribution company at the time, he was a great musician, Carlos Guaico, and he's been involved in a lot of groups. He was one of the founding members of the Black Eyed Peas, the Breakestra, of Ozo Motley, and he quit all of them, but he has a great group called the Rebirth. And there's a joke among friends. You'll hate me for saying this, but it's like, if you want your band to blow up, have Carlos be part of it and have him quit your band. Because
as soon as he leaves, you're hitting the big time. Yeah.
All of those bands, he's an amazing musician, producer, and person too. And he says, well, why don't I take you to Joel Seufer, who's the guy who mixes and masters all our stuff, all the Rebirths, because the Rebirth records are just slamming. People, I mean, they're on the level of like Steely Dan.
Yeah.
And they are amazing. And so I was like, okay, well, I went to meet Joel. I gave him kind of the last money of whatever budget I had. I said, can you help me make this sound like a pro record? And it was amazing seeing him in action. Like I remember in 45 minutes, he did to one song what it had taken me 3 months to do. I mean, he bettered it. He didn't just do it, he bettered it. In 45 minutes, I had a song that sounded like a record all of a sudden. So I was like, ah. So we did the whole record in like 4 days, you know. I had been working on it for 6 months. And that was mixed and mastered, you know. It was just, so it's like, okay, this is somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so after that experience, we got along really well. And he invited me to just start hanging around. And that's what I did. I mean, for 6 months after that, a year after that, I would, any free day, couple hours I had in my day, I would go and hang out and just sit next to Joel. Once in a while ask questions, but just watch him and have him say things to me. And then after a year, he's like, well, why don't you just come and work here at the studio? You kind of learned the ropes.
Do you have a sample from that in this? Like, he gave me 23 songs that we might play. So
you know what? I don't have something from that period, unfortunately. But let's say, oh God. Let's say, no, unfortunately. Well, I'll play you something that Joel actually mixed and mastered, which is a recent project that I was involved in. By an artist out of LA called Yellow Alex. It's more on the line of old school Prince, and it's called Runnin'.
Yeah, okay. Having to cut songs off in the middle.
That's cool.
We'll run out of time. So that was actually mixed and mastered
by Joel.
By Joel.
I slept on that project, which I should have brought an example of, but it's a record by a Brazilian singer named Chita Lima, and it's her first record titled 1111. And
So from your stories, I'm sensing a theme of paying attention to what's going on around you and learning from it. Before this, you told me, now I haven't heard this story yet. He just told me, oh, I've got a great story about a Celia Cruz gig that's all about like being a professional. Oh. So I'm just, on that theme of learning from those around you, I'm going to just go fanboy and ask for the Celia Cruz story.
For Celia Cruz is like one of my favorite artists ever, any genre. She's been called the greatest salsa singer, period. It didn't matter that she was a woman or a man or Martian or whatever. She's the greatest. And I remember I was in the band. She had bands all over the world. And I would just happen to be at the time to be in the band that was her West Coast band. And every time Celia would go to California, I was always either on tour playing other gigs, so I didn't get to be in the gigs. And finally, I got my shot once where she was, that's when, it was her last biggest hit before she passed away, was a song called Carnaval. Smash world hit for her. And we were going to play it on TV. And so we knew the song because we had rehearsed it and the whole thing. And she didn't have to go to rehearse. She didn't even go to sound check. You know, we were going to do it live on TV, the whole thing. And she just showed up. And I remember when they were about to announce her, you know, I was sitting there behind my drums, and I saw her. And I saw her just coming on this side of the stage, to the edge of the stage, and she was in a wheelchair. And there she was, dressed in her sparkly blue outfit with her blue neon hair and heavily made up and the whole thing, but in a wheelchair. And I thought, dope. It's going to be the first time I've ever seen her perform in a wheelchair. And when they said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Celia Cruz to the stage, she just like got up, she grabbed the mic from the presenter like this, and she went up, Azúcar! Wah! Wah! And then she sang the song better than the recording. It was just amazing. I mean, she was pushing us. We weren't pushing her. Usually as a musician, you're pushing the artist to do more. And no, her energy was like a volcano. You know, she was like, I think she was like 81 or 82 at the time. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Just murdered the song flawlessly, better than flawlessly. And then like, she took a bow when she was done with it. She went to the side of the stage, she collapsed into the wheelchair. And it was just like, wow. You know, to me that was like one of the biggest lessons in professionalism, because the woman was dying of cancer. And it didn't stop her. She flew like all the way from New York to do that gig. She couldn't walk, she could barely talk, but she went and she gave a performance that any one of us would be like, that's the highlight performance of our life. She did it. And I was like, sorry, I'm getting all choked up, but it's like, whew. She was amazing. She was
the power of music.
Oof, man, she moved, you know, she moved people.
And I think that's what a lot of us realize is there is a reason why we do this.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes finding that reason is important. When you were giving me the sort of chronology of your career earlier, you mentioned that you stopped playing for a little while.
Yeah.
And then started again. Tell me a little bit about what was it that made you realize, like, okay, this is important. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. After
the whole experience with that band where I started doing production, we were signed, but then our record was shelved. And I later found out what it was to be on the lowest rung of the old music industry, where some records were made to be written off as expenses for the company on the bigger scheme of things. No, they knew from the get-go that they weren't going to release our record. They were just we were going to be a write-off for them.
Yeah.
So it was like, you know, I was through. I was like, forget this music business thing, this music. I'm through. You know, I was 22. I was like, I'm done. And I started doing everything I could, you know, to find something else to do. So I was actually, a very rewarding experience was being a teacher's assistant in a special reading lab for like elementary age kids with reading disabilities. I worked as a concierge in a hotel. I worked as a valet, you name it. I started filling up my time with things to do. But after like a year and a half of doing this, I was just like, what am I doing? I hate my life. I'm not doing anything. It's like, and then a friend of mine called me for a gig, and I was like, oh my God, this feels so good. I'm going back to this. And I realized it's like, yeah, I mean, music wasn't to blame for all the things that had happened in my life. It was people that made those decisions that I had made too. Music never gave me anything except joy. Right. And opportunities to grow and do things. So that was what I did during that period.
So would you have a piece of advice for how to piece together a life built around this idea of music gives us joy? It's the stuff around it that can be problematic.
Just remember that music is music and people are people. You know, music is, the word in Spanish is agradecida. So it's the most thankful thing I've ever come across. It's like love. Music is love. But music, the only thing you have to do with music is give to it. You put in your time, you put in your love, and don't make the mistake of asking for anything back. Sorry. Don't make the mistake of asking for anything back. Music is like a plant. You don't plant the seed and then, you know, sit right next to it and say, okay, grow, give me some avocados. No. You know, you plant it, you water it, you talk to it, you know, you make sure it's doing well, but you keep at it. And eventually it returns so many good things in life. People, a whole nother matter. Yeah. But don't get those. Avocados. Yeah, give me some avocados. Okay, I gotta go find out now. But don't mix those things up. As long as you keep your focus, whatever you decide to do, just keep at it. Keep doing your music, keep doing your thing. Really love it, respect it. It will give back to you. Just, you know, don't be mad at it because you can't pay your rent this month. Maybe look inside and see, well, what kind of decisions have I made that have impeded me from paying my rent? Music had nothing to do with it, you know? Those kinds of things.
So you mentioned before that you, on this one record, you were acting as the label as well. What made you decide, oh, I've had so much fun as a percussionist and piano player that I want to go into the record label business?
Folly, right? I remember in the summer of 2003, I had gotten an invitation to study in Cuba, in Havana. Two of my favorite percussionists ever and my idols and masters, you know, a guy named Tata Guines, who was like the grandfather of modern conga playing anywhere in the world, you know. And then another guy named Changuito. I had met them in a show that they did in San Francisco, which I drove 6 hours to go see. And they invited me to go study with them in Cuba. And I was like, oh, amazing. So what I did was like work for 6 months. I saved up all my money and I got myself a plane ticket to Cuba and I went. And I was there studying with them every other day. I would have a day on, day off, day on, day off. And while I was there, I was loving every minute, loving the whole experience. And then something clicked one day. I was like, man, these guys are world-revered masters. I mean, these are the two guys that modern Latin percussion can be traced to them too. You know, any Latin percussionist in the world can trace whatever they're doing to what they did and how they innovated Latin percussion. And these guys are still hustling for gigs. And I thought, wow, it's crazy. I mean, like to see a master, like an undisputed, you know, Muhammad Ali of percussion hustling for gigs. And I was just like, oh man, this can't be. So then I started thinking, it's like, well, maybe what can I do so I can get, so it's not such a lonely individual kind of path in life. And I figured, well, that creating music and like opening up avenues for communal music making is a way where I'm not only helping other people, but creating something where people give back at the same time. You give and you get back, you give and you get back. That was the moment where I decided to do a record. I was like, whoa, a record label, shoot, I'm putting out records, I'm giving work to musicians that I like, and then I'm giving joy to people, and then people will give back, and I figured that was my way of approaching it. That's how I got into it. And that's been the whole point of
if we had more benevolent record label owners, we'd be okay.
Right. But it was a hard experience, but in the end, I got swallowed up by the collapse of the music industry in 2006, you know. It was an awful experience. I spent my life savings on a production. I got a whole, you know, I had a lawyer and I had a distribution company. And there's all these channels, all these things. I spent all my money and my time on this record, and I gave it to the distribution company, who was also, you know, distributed by by Bayside, who was the owner of Tower Records. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks later, Tower Records folded. Nobody knew. Nobody had any idea. So with Tower Records, 95% of record sales in the United States went away. And I was like, I was done. You know? But do I blame music for that? No, again, it's people. Music is what I was in huge amount of debt. I was sure that this record was going to do well because we had gotten lots of positive feedback from like Giles Peterson in England and Marco Verman of The World on NPR. All these people were giving us great feedback and spinning the record, and it was just like lots of great buzz. But it all fell through. But it wasn't music that, you know, caused the collapse.
Right. It was those stinking Tower Records.
You know, what are you going to do? But yeah.
Speaking of music, let's play some more.
Okay, sounds good.
Which one do you like?
Well, is anybody, I don't know, I mean, I like all of them. What do you want to do?
Okay, let me rephrase that. Which one has a good story with it?
Oh, man. Okay, you know what? I'll show you a really positive example of, let's play 2 examples. Number 1 and number 19.
Okay. We'll do number 1 first. I have to turn my volume back up. Sorry about that.
There's a long thing into it.
Bajo un sol infame, tierra caliente, sus rayos como golpes rabiosos pulsan sobre la gente. Una criatura corre.
If you saw me counting, the joke is you can't see the name of the song, but it's 2 + 0 + 1 + 2 = 5. Is the name of the tune. Anyway.
It's called Cinco. That is the first track off of, there's a group, it's like an institution in LA. And in the Mexican American community, it's called Quetzal, of which I'm a member now. Quetzal, they're some of the first people that I met when I first moved to LA 15 years ago were Quetzal and Marta, the lead singer and then the founder of the group. And they're people that I had worked with I had known. Yeah. They were buddies, and they've always been committed to doing really great music that's influenced by traditional Mexican music and music from around the world. In like 2011, I think it was, 2011, Quetzal, the founder of the group, asked me, he said, you know, we just got picked up by the Smithsonian Folkways label for a 1 record deal kind of a thing to do this album that's going to be kind of like a story of our history until then, which was, at the time, it was like 16 years of history. So they made this album through the Smithsonian Folkways label, in which they showcased all of the phases of the group: acoustic, rock. This is the first track on the album, which is it's based on jarocho music from Veracruz in Mexico, but in 5 and other influences. Excuse me. And that, so we recorded that at Coney Island Studios, which is where I work with Joel Seufer, who's my mentor in engineering. We recorded that record there. I did not play, Quetzal had asked me to participate as a player too on some tracks, but I was like, no, I'll just be an engineer on this one. Peter Reiniger, who's the official engineer of the Smithsonian Folkways, he was the head engineer and he mixed it, but since it was my home turf, I actually did the dirty work for him there. And the album became, we ended up winning a Grammy last year for it in the Best Latin Alternative Rock or Urban category. So it was like, it was a turning point. It was something that I did purely for the love of it, to participate in something with my friends. And then it just grew, and it's amazing. And then about a year after that, then Quetzal and Marta asked me to join the group, and I've been in the group since 2012, and it's been great.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's, we'll hit this next one. Do you want to say something before I hit start? Or you?
No, let's hit this, because this is drastically different.
Keep expecting for Curtis Mayfield to come in singing in Spanish.
Right? This is an amazing project. This has also been a great lesson in just like, do what you love. This is from a project, a band that I play in now. It's called Jungle Fire. And it's based out of LA. It's a 10-piece Afro-Latin funk band. The story of this group is amazing because there's some friends from LA that founded it. They got together, a DJ in LA who's heads this kind of like this b-boy kind of association movement called Cypher Addicts. And he says, man, we have these breaks, 70s Latin funk breaks that we want to hear live because nobody plays this music anymore. Can you guys, for one of our b-boy events, because talking to my friends, I was not involved in the group at that time. Can you put together something with these tunes? So they did. They did a 20-minute show, a one-off thing. They got together this repertoire and they played 20 minutes for these b-boys live, and it was an amazing experience. And so they're like, well, yeah, that was fun, cool, awesome. Why don't we record it? Since we did it. So then when they started recording the thing, it's like, well, let's add more percussion. That's when they called me into the project, and what we did is we recorded a 45, a 7-inch, 2 cuts. This cut, which is a cover of Fela. The song is Let's Start by Fela Kuti, but we decided to model our version after a cover of that made by Firpo, which is this Latin funk group from Venezuela from the 70s. So then we made kind of a cover of that and then modified it. So it's a cover of a cover. And we recorded it. Okay, it's cool. And then we did an original song on the B-side called Tokuta. And we just purely for the love of it, just to have something to hang on our walls, like our little project. And somebody sent the 7-inch over to the BBC in England. And Giles Peterson, who's like a really famous DJ, got his hands on it, and Snowboy was another famous DJ and percussionist. And before we knew it, they're writing one of our co-leaders and founding members, Steve Haney. They're like, yo, what is this? We want this. So They go, it's like, okay, cool. Do you have more? It's like, okay, well, let's record another 2 songs. And we did it. And before we knew it, it was like on Craig Charles's funk show on BBC 6 every Saturday night from 8 to 10. He has like the biggest funk show in the UK. We're on that thing every week. It was like, whoa. It's like, whoa. Maybe we should do a show and start playing this stuff live. So we did that. We started playing and doing a couple of shows live, and then like 6 months later, we get this call from England. It's like, hey, would you guys like to do a tour of England and play this? It was like, whoa, and it was Craig Charles, and there's people from the BBC, and like some other, and Snowboy, and people in that scene, DJ Luby from Leeds. They put together a 10-day tour. We did 8 concerts in 8 cities in 10 days. Off of 245s that we just did just for the hell of it. And it was just amazing. It was like, you talk about music giving back. It was like, ah.
So was the decision to release those on 45s based on the idea that it was this DJ culture that you're sort of catering to anyway?
Yeah. It's that DJ culture is just a cool thing. Nobody's putting out 45s anymore. And like, it was just cool. And all the guys, the founding members of the band are like part of like the deep old school funk scene in LA and California. They're like in Breakestra, Orgone, and Rugged Nuggets, and there's all these bands. So they're like, yeah, no, let's just put it on 45 because it's just way cooler. Sounds great. It was all recorded to, 1/4-inch tape, 8 channels with Tascam 388. I mean, it was just like all done old school, live, You get 1 mic or maybe 2 for the drums, that kind of thing. 1 for the horns, all that stuff. Reverb live, the whole thing. And that's an example of how music, you just give it to it, do it for the pleasure of it. I think it becomes apparent.
Yeah.
People can, there's something in it that touches people when it's done with honesty and with love, I think.
Okay, we're going to do some questions in just a second, so start thinking of them. But before we get to the questions, we've talked about a lot of different things that you do, and the having, irons and multiple fires, being able to do a lot of things is important. If you could give one piece of advice to, like, how to find your path, how to be successful, here's your chance to preach.
Ooh.
Preach.
Oh. Sorry, I'm terrible at that. But I think the important thing is when I took time off of music is when I had to do some soul searching. And the important thing is to really look inside yourself, inside oneself, and see what is really you. What are you? Are you a guitar player? Are you a singer? Is that who you are? Is that what you want to do? Or are you a composer? Or do you like arranging? Do you like making music for other people, but don't necessarily come up with your own? Or do you like sitting behind machines? You really gotta ask yourself what you really like. And if you like it, accept it. Be like, okay, so I'm not Wynton Marsalis, It's cool. But what am I? You come to grip with who you are and what you like. And then after that, just work really hard at being that. I think people spend a lot of time trying to be this and that, trying to be, as opposed to being, be who you really are. That's interesting. I really have no interest in seeing a reflection of all my favorite artists in one person's music. Like, I hate listening to records where I go, okay, I see who they like, but there's nothing there. Like, I'd rather go listen to those records than that. Be you. That's totally interesting. It's totally cool. It's way cooler. A really cool original artist is way better than the best cover band in the world. Not to speak against cover bands either. It's just cool. I was going to say, but
the best cover band in the world is really good at paying your rent.
Yeah.
as I've for years made a living playing brick house wearing a tuxedo.
Yeah.
It's gotten me here. So.
Yeah. No, there's nothing.
Fortunately, I don't have to do that too often anymore. But it's fun to go back and visit the old.
But at the same time, it's also, if you are a musician for a cover band, then be cool with it.
Yeah.
Be cool with it. It's like, no, I play music. I like doing this. So be good at it. Cool. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's amazing.
I know this is your interview, but I'm going to tell a story anyway, because you just reminded me. And y'all know me, it's so hard to get me to talk. Back in 2006, I went up to Chicago to do a project with a bunch of improvisers up there. And I realized that they all, like we did all these rehearsals over a week. We spent over 40 hours this week rehearsing and gigging this music. And we recorded the last gig. We had a record out of it. But I think we made $120 over the 4 gigs and all the rehearsals. And no one ever complained. Like,
it's the best 40 hours you ever spent in your life.
Right. I mean, we were at the end of a 3.5-hour rehearsal, and somebody would say, well, tonight when we play this, we should make sure it's like this. And then somebody else in the band would say, well, let's just run it again. You know, like, there was no issue at the time. But I realized these guys all had other jobs. Like, they worked at the record store, they were a translator or a bartender or whatever. And so the music was about making the music. And they had made other arrangements to make sure their life worked that allowed them to make the music.
Yeah.
Which isn't, I mean, they got paid when there was, you know, I don't want to say they were bad business people, but I got really jealous. I was like, wow, I spend a lot of time playing music that I kind of don't like as a way to fund playing all this music that I do like. And so I went round and round with that, and I thought, well, maybe I should quit playing all these stupid gigs and only play art gigs, and I'll just go get a day job. And then I realized it would take me 3 days working at Barnes & Noble to make what I could make in 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon playing somebody's wedding. And I made peace with that. I was like, oh, okay, well, that is my day job. My day job is playing the trombone. And then I was suddenly like very peaceful and happy with it. Yeah. And it was super cool. But it took some of what you said of like, be comfortable with who you are. And I realized, okay, playing Brick House in a Tuxedo was part of who I am. I mean, and once I was okay with that, it was cool. It was a lot easier to spend that money.
You're making me think of, you know, kind of nightmare situations, but like when we're in the studio and, you know, some artist comes along with a lot of money but no talent, but it's like, make a good sounding record for me. It's like, well, let's say somebody who can't sing that all of a sudden wants to sound like a pop star.
Yeah.
You're spending days with Melodyne and auto-tune and editing something to make, you know, Pavarotti out of a chipmunk, you know? And it's hard work, it's unnerving, it's awful, and then, you know, you got people say, how come it doesn't sound right yet? It's like, oh God, how do you tell them? But in the end, you step back and go, hey, this is my job. Like, how amazing is this? And in the end, I'm still doing music.
Right, it still beats working.
It still beats work. It's hard work, you know, 25 hours of editing, but it's still music.
On that note, we should open it up. Does anyone have any questions? Maybe get a little house light, see if we have hands up there. Kevin, where are the microphones? Oh, there's microphones on either side. If you have a question, please make your way to the microphone. We'll be so inspiring that we've answered all of your questions already. Well, while you're thinking of one more, I'll have one more for Alberto. So there's a track on here from an instructional CD, DVD that you did. Tell me how that came about.
It's amazing. A friend of mine moved from Colombia. He's an amazing percussionist, traditional percussionist. His name is Eduardo Martinez, and he's played with all the greatest folklore singers and artists in Colombia, Totola Momposina, Petrona Martinez. This guy's a legend. And he's really good. He's even been sampled by Timbaland, and he didn't even know it, you know? And he's been anyway, he moved to LA, and we're just saying like, hey, you play this traditional music that's nobody knows about it outside of Colombia, or very few people do, so why don't we just put something out there to show people what you do. So we came up with this instructional method. It's really ambitious. We're trying to do like the whole gamut of Afro-Colombian rhythms in one volume. We lost count at over 40 rhythms, so we're like, okay, maybe we should do a volume of 10. So this is something off of that. And off of that, we've actually people have licensed these tracks around the world. People in Uruguay, in Germany, in Japan. Just because something that we just put out there. And it's something showcasing a traditional art. then this is Eduardo Martinez.
Yeah, I'll play
Which
you
one?
have a couple on here. Which one? I'll do the example.
The example is actually him demonstrating, because in every track there's 10 rhythms, 20 tracks. For each rhythm there was like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we would play an instrument and then show how each instrument was played and then how they came together. And then there was an example track. The example track is how it's supposed to sound when it's all put together. So this is for cumbia, which is a famous style from Colombia. He played everything.
I never thought about the idea of having like a traditional example become licensable material, like that people want.
It's crazy. Will you play the beginning of the Mapalé track? I just want you to hear 10 seconds of what the format was like, and I'll tell you a story about one of the licenses.
Mapalé, Maracón, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So he's talking, and he's showing how he's doing. He's playing Maracón right here, really fast. 2 Maracón. And then he plays.
1, 2, 3, 4.
He's playing another. Right? We could stop right there. And it goes on. He introduces every drum like that. And it's really cool. Well, we got a request for a licensing for some Uruguayan, for an Uruguayan producer and musician that residing in New York City, who's also kind of like a famous DJ. He's like, well, we want to license this track. And I looked and it was the instructional one. I was like, are you sure? He's like, oh yeah. That's the one we want. He's like, are you sure? You want all that talking? I could just give you the track. No, that's the one we want. And like a week later, he builds a whole track around the instructional one. You could hear him going, tambora, 1, 2, 3. And then there's this amazing tango track with like electronica, and then this singer, and there's all this stuff on top of that track. And the crazy thing is, one day I was in New York City on tour, and I go to an underground club, and I heard it. I was like, whoa, that's amazing. But you never know. I mean, it's like, and that guy was, like I said, we just did it for the love of it, just to do it.
That's great. So I see no one at the question mics. So I will say to the booth, leave the audio on my computer up for a minute, because we're going to rock some more of that Jungle Fire as we leave. But,
well, can I do one more? Sorry,
yeah.
Let me just say one thing. I did want to speak about a very project that's kind of very dear to my heart. It's something that I've been working with some people over the last 6 months, and we still got about another 4 months before our launch. But it's a company called Artivist Entertainment. The idea is to, about a year ago, I got together with Quetzal Flores. He actually called me into it. Quetzal Flores, who's the leader of the band that I play with, Quetzal. Maya Jupiter, who's an amazing artist from Australia. And Veronica Gonzalez, who's a great, she's an industry kind of insider. She's worked marketing and press for Capitol Records and for Luaka Bop, the label by David Byrne in New York. And then the last piece of the puzzle was Aloe Black. Now, I've known Aloe Black for a long time, just around the scene, since when he was an underground artist in New York. And putting together a company that kind of summarizes all of what we do and what we care about. First thing being music and art and social activism, hence the name Artivist. It's a company dedicated to positive social change through art. And we hope that, we have our first releases coming up. Actually, Aloe's upcoming album is not really, it's related to that. But yeah, we hope that you'll be able to check it out. Keep tuned for it, keep looking out for it. Within the next 3-4 months, we'll be launching it, and hope it'll be something that we could, you guys can support us, because we really want everyone supported. We want everybody's involvement in this, creating like a new paradigm for the music industry and for art around the world. in a communal sense, art for everybody and with everybody. So keep out for it. Keep on the lookout for it.
Okay, see, now I saw one of those tracks in here, so we'll have to play that
Yeah,
as we
that's
go.
cool.
But everyone, please thank Alberto.